Michelle. Good evening, everyone. So before I get into my personal story and then the slideshow, I just want to do a brief overview of what CCSA is, how we got started, because I think it provides really, really important context to just our overall mission and then the stuff we're going to be talking about tonight in general. So CCSA was started, it was 2019. It was two parents, the Foremans. They had a daughter, and while she was in a yeshiva day school and yeshiva high school, she started to suffer from issues with addiction. They found, the intersection of observance and addiction treatment to be extremely, extremely lacking, and the whole experience of having a observant child and being an observant family, and also going through what it means to have a child who's addicted was very, very isolating for them. Fortunately, she got the support she needed, she got the treatment they needed, and after she was stable in her recovery, they decided that it was important for them to speak about their experience and really, really shine a light on what it means to both be an observant Jew and have a child who's dealing with addiction. And they had a really, really big town hall in Teaneck. Hundreds of families showed up. And afterwards, dozens of people came to them and said, we are going through something similar. We have a child, we have a sibling, we have a parent, and there seems to just be so much lacking in the way of support in addiction for observant Jewish individuals. After consulting with a variety of community leaders, rabbis, mental health professionals, really what came about was there was just an extreme lack of prevention education. Like, yes, we do need to be able to treat an individual once they get to the point of addiction, but more importantly, how can we prevent individuals from getting to that point of addiction? And you're going to hear in my story, nothing like this existed when I was at SAR. Nothing like this existed when my peers were at Ramaz or Frisch or Flatbush or anywhere, you name it. This wasn't something we spoke about. And this is a program that without a doubt, myself personally and my family would have benefited greatly from. And over the course of CCSA's inception, we have since partnered with OHEL. We are now under their umbrella. This past year, we were in our 100th school. We're in 103 schools nationwide. We have, over the course of our organization's history, I think it's over 35,000 students we have reached. So the work that we are doing is something that obviously I'm extremely passionate about for multiple reasons, but the biggest one is like if even one individual can avoid the mistakes that I made, everything we do is worth it. Everything we do is worth it. So like Michelle said, I am an alumni of this school, and I'm an alumni of the high school. I grew up in New Rochelle. I had two amazing, loving parents. I had a younger brother. There were just so many kids my age in the neighborhood. There was nothing lacking from an outsider's perspective on what you would think like a child needs and wants growing up. I was also fortunate enough, I was very athletic for a guy. That's like 90% of what you need to make friends when you're young. I went to Camp Marshaw in the summer, so I had a whole other social group of kids from camp, and just totally idyllic on the outside looking in. My family had a big secret though, and that was that my father was an alcoholic, and he came from a long line of alcoholics. He converted, and my family on my patrilineal side is just a lot of really proud English Protestant alcoholics. My great-grandfather and my grandfather both died of complications of the disease. My father has had an active alcoholic since he was a teenager. And growing up, I wasn't exposed to anybody else's home. All I knew was my home, so it really wasn't strange for me to see him come home from work 7:30, 8 o'clock at night, and the first thing he would do was go to the liquor cabinet, pour himself a big half glass of scotch, write down, pour himself another half glass, and then he would come in and say good night or good evening, how was your day, all those things. I thought that's what every dad did. You worked hard, you helped put money in the bank, you helped put food on the table, and so as a result, you came home, you got to drink, and you got to relax a little bit, and I really thought every dad did this. This was just my experience, and he would pretty much drink until he would pass out, whether it was on the couch, in bed, whatever. Deeper than that, it was just my exposure throughout my community that alcohol was such a fundamental part of the social fabric. And again, my only experiences with the Jewish community, but just like every time we went for a Shabbat meal, it was this $150 bottle of wine, this 18-year-old scotch. Like I just remember feeling like I couldn't wait to be a part of that. Like it looked so fun, this alcohol stuff, this drinking stuff. And the messaging that I received, both from pop culture and the society at large, but also individuals like my friends, my family, was that the teenage years were the best part of your life. And on top of that, it was really the substances that made the teenage years the best part of your life. Like, yeah, you could have fun as a teenager, but if you really wanted to make the most of it, you were going to drink a little bit, you were going to smoke a little bit, you were going to try nicotine products. Like, that is what's really going to really create the memories. So by the time I'm 15 years old, I've had all this exposure, and I'm hanging out at a friend's basement here in Riverdale, and another one of my friends shows up with a Poland Spring bottle full of vodka. And for me, it wasn't anything premeditated. It wasn't anything calculated. There was no peer pressure. There was no trepidation. It was very matter of fact. I was like, okay, alcohol is here. This is the point in time where I'm actually going to become a teenager. It wasn't my bar mitzvah. It wasn't getting into high school. It's this moment now. I'm going to drink. The teenage years are starting. Best years of my life are about to begin. And for me, it was just like, this is obvious that I should be doing this because of everything that I've been exposed to that point. So I drank, and nothing bad happened. And it was the exact opposite. I had a really, really, really good time. And that was the problem. Because from that point on, alcohol became a part of my decision-making process in every social situation. It was not enough anymore to go see my friends and go to a movie or hang out Saturday night playing board games or video games or just doing just like whatever the normal socialization stuff was. It was, when are we going to incorporate alcohol? We're going to the movies, great. Who's bringing the booze? We're hanging out, we're going to play video games, board games, whatever. Who's bringing the alcohol? And everything else seemed, not as fun. It was a little less exciting. It was more boring. And just alcohol was now fundamentally part of what I wanted in the socialization process. A few weeks later, the same thing happened with marijuana. And now I have two substances that are part of this process. And pretty much from that point forward, until I graduated high school, every single opportunity I got to drink or smoke, I took advantage of it. And that really accelerated, I would say, midway through my junior year. I had my license, I had a car, I was much more independent. And it was almost every weekend that I was getting drunk and or getting high. As we go through this slideshow, I'm going to kind of get into a little bit more about the risk factors, the protective factors, the warning signs, and the things that I didn't realize. But I had no idea what I was doing to my brain. I had no idea that the actions I was taking as a 15, 16, 17, and 18-year-old in high school were fundamentally creating a whole divergent path for me that I was now walking on that I otherwise wouldn't have been exposed to. I thought that this is something that every teenager does, and no matter how I behave, my life is going to kind of end up in the same way as everybody else in my community, everybody else around me, and that it really wasn't anything I could do to disrupt that, and that, growing up in maturation, that was just something that happened. I went to Israel for the year. I had a great time. I got back, really excited for college, looking forward to this next stage of independence, this next stage of growth. And, I was going to a school. I was going to Queens College. It wasn't like I was going so far away, so I still had like the comforts of home and a decent support group. But the second I got to college, it was this flip. And all of a sudden, all I could experience was anxiety and insecurity and just constantly feeling overwhelmed and just stuff I had never, ever, ever dealt with before. And I remember thinking, I really need to ask for help for this. I'm not going to class. I'm not hanging out with my friends. I'm not engaging with my hobbies. And I've never experienced any negativity like this. I don't know what to do. It's really disarming, and I need to ask for help. And as soon as that thought finished, it was replaced with, but if you get high right now, you don't have to feel anything and you don't have to put any work in whatsoever. You can just have that immediate sense of relaxation, and you can get rid of the anxiety, and you can exhale, and everything will slow down. And so that's what I did. And my entire first semester in college was pretty much spent, I would wake up, I would get high. If I made the class grade, if I didn't, that was okay too. And, somehow barely managed to pass some of my courses. And went into winter break really without any desire or urgency that there was any need to change. I hurt my knee playing basketball, and I got prescribed Percocet. And this is really when the slope becomes, it's like one of those cartoons where someone's like walking up the stairs, and then all of a sudden it gets flat and they fall right back down. Like that's what happened when I took the Percocet. It was just this really, really, really rapid descent. The first time I took a Percocet was just eye-opening in a way that's really, really hard for me to articulate. But it was just this feeling of confidence and euphoria and well-being and motivation and energy. And I knew in that moment I had found my skeleton key to happiness, that this was what was going to help me achieve and reach my potential, and that there was no way I was going to be without this substance for the remainder of my life. And I knew three things about it. I knew how good it made me feel. I knew that it was prescribed by a doctor, so how bad could it be? And I knew that I was supposed to take 1 to 2 pills every 6 to 8 hours. And so, that's what I was going to do. Again, I had no benefit of a program like what we do with the kids. I didn't know about the addiction cycle. I didn't know about tolerance. I didn't understand anything about the medication that I was taking. And so the moment where I decided that this was going to be something that was going to be a part of my life forever, I didn't understand that I was like hammering the nails into my own coffin. And 1 pill became 2. 2 became 4, 4 became 8, and just to fast forward for the sake of time, but 2 years after that first Percocet pill, I really descended into addiction. I'm an IV heroin addict. I'm essentially dropped out of school. Like nothing else matters. I'm living out of an apartment in Queens half the time, in my car half the other time, and just my entire life at that point, now at 21, 22 years old, all that matters is how can I get my next high? The heroin was the only thing that I cared about. It was the only thing I associated with safety. It was the only thing I associated with survival. And it didn't matter what history or prior standing relationship we had. If you were an impediment to me getting my next high, you were someone persona non grata. I wanted nothing to do with you. You could be someone I just met who was, objectively a very shady person, but if you were willing to partner with me in my schemes and my lies and my manipulation to get to the next high, welcome to the club. You were my new best friend. And this is essentially how I existed for, most of my age 21 and pretty much half of my age 22. It was the summer of 2012, and I was, 22 and a half years old, and that's when I went to treatment for the first time. And at 22 and a half, that's when I really started to learn a lot of what we talked to the 6th, the 7th, and the 8th graders about. The addiction cycle, coping mechanisms, refusal skills. This is stuff no one had ever talked to me about before, no one ever educated me on before. Just really, really vital information that could have been of immense, immense benefit had it been taught in a preventative way. And now it was being taught in a reactive way. And at this point, I understood, I don't want to do heroin anymore. I don't want to have this kind of stress lifestyle where I'm trying to constantly figure out how I'm going to get my next high. But I was told in no uncertain terms as well, I could not drink anymore. I could not use any other mood-altering substances because any of those substances was going to trigger my addiction and take me back to where I was. And that was a bridge too far. For me at that point, it was how am I supposed to socialize without alcohol? How am I supposed to date without alcohol? How am I supposed to celebrate without alcohol? There was just no way anybody could convince me that just because I had a problem with heroin, that alcohol was also going to be a problem substance. And so I was willing to admit on an intellectual level, yes, I understand the addiction cycle, and these coping skills are great, and sure, the refusal skills, they can come in handy from time to time. But I'm going to drink when I leave out of here, and that's just a matter of fact. And everyone said, okay, just understand, best case scenario is you end up back in a place like this. Best case scenario is you get back into a rehab, right? Because there are plenty of people who only get one shot at this. And they get out and they use, and that's it. And I left that treatment center, and I did exactly what I said I was going to do, and I drank. And what happened to me was exactly what they told me was going to happen to me. And for the next 6 years, I was on the world's worst hamster wheel. I ended up back with a needle in my arm. I ended up back on the streets. And I was in and out of treatment centers, doctor's offices. I was in all different kinds of places all over the country, different types of therapies. Just the next 6 years was really just so many fits and stops. I had periods of sobriety and I had periods of use, and just really just overall didn't really able to get any traction. And so finally I'm 28 years old and I'm out of my 6th rehab, and it really hits me all of a sudden just where I am in my life as opposed to all of my peers. And just everyone who had been in my corner, they really had all moved on and they didn't really care anymore. Everyone was tired of my act. All my friends now, they were married and they had kids and they were buying homes and careers, and there was no time in their lives to worry about their old friend who just can't seem to get his life together. And my younger brother, was like way past me. He had graduated, he was working as a veterinarian. Like, I had nothing. And at a deeper level, I saw all these people around me and they had a sense of self and they had morals and values and ethics and these things that to me just seemed like came intuitively to everybody else. Like, I felt like I had missed something along the way. Like, how does everybody know how to feel like who they are? I just felt like I was a leaf blowing in the wind. No sense of self, no morals, no values. And I knew that I really didn't have the energy to go on. I didn't think I was ever going to have the ability to get sober. I really thought that, I had a great first 18 years, and for whatever reason, this was my lot in life, and this was not something I was going to be able to overcome. And so I got out of treatment, and I went home to my parents, and that night I decided that I was going to take my own life, because it's just really hard for me when I speak to articulate the sense of exhaustion that I felt, of just what my life had been like for the decade prior, and just this idea that I really did not think that there was any other option for me. I thought this was it. Like, I never imagined in a million years I could be doing something like this. It was so unfathomable to me that there was a way out of this. And so that night I pulled my car into the garage, duct taped, sealed the windows and doors as best I could. I was just going to allow the exhaust to fill up in the garage and suffocate me, and that was going to be that. I did not think there were any other options. And, grace of God, technical mishap, fluke of the universe, however you want to define it, when I went to go close the garage door and I, hit the door close button, the garage door went about halfway. It kind of froze. It wouldn't go up, wouldn't go down. I was pressing, nothing would happen. And all of a sudden, I just broke down in tears, because I knew, like, really deep down that I did want to live. But the real fear for me was that I didn't know how. That even though I had this desire to be a functioning member of society, to have a family and have a job and a career and all these things, like, I just didn't know how people were able to do that. And so I made a promise that for 1 year, I was going to completely abdicate my decision-making process, because I knew that there were people who had been in my position who had achieved the things that I wanted. And I knew that I had no idea how to get to that point, but obviously they did. And so for 1 whole year, I devoted myself. I went to pretty much daily Alcoholics or Narcotics Anonymous meetings. I got a therapist and a psychiatrist, and I got on proper medication for, helping my mood and things. I started going to the gym and eating healthier. I basically woke up and went to bed at the same time for an entire year. And, at the start of that, I said, if I'm going to give this 100%, everything I have, and if 1 year's time my life isn't better, I can go out on the streets, and however my life is going to play out, it's going to play out, however long I last, but I'm done bothering my friends, I'm done bothering my family. I'm just going to, kind of excise myself from their lives, and I'm not going to be a bother to them. And that was July 3rd, 2018. And on July 3rd, 2019, I celebrated a year sober, and my life was much better. I still had a long way to go, but it was much, much better from where it was. And I made a second promise that I was going to devote the rest of my life to helping other people who were suffering with alcoholism, addiction, mental health issues, and their families. Because addiction is a family disease, and whether families realize it or not, if they have a loved one who is affected with the disease of addiction, they themselves now need to enter into program of recovery. They need supports, they need a community, and it's not just about their loved one. So I went back to school, I got degrees, I got certifications. I'm now thankfully working licensed social worker. I've been at CCSA. This is my 3rd year as the program manager. I've been working with alcoholics and addicts in various capacities since, mid-2020. But this is the most important thing that I do. It's more important than the groups I run, more important than the people I have sessions with. It's more important than anything else I do is, these programs, talking to the parents, talking to the kids, giving back to the community that I grew up in. When I talk to the kids, they're not going to hear the same story that you guys heard. They get an abridged version, just without some of the harsher details, because I just want them to, I don't want to traumatize them. I want them to still be able to focus on just really the idea that someone from their community can have this fall. And at the end of telling the story, I talked to the kids about really the most important thing I want them to take away from the presentations. That's the idea of asking for help. I could have made changes to my life much earlier had I been willing to ask for help in a more sincere way, but for whatever reason I didn't. My ego, trouble with vulnerability, my views on what manhood was, probably a combination of all those things. And I really want the kids to understand that vulnerability is not a weakness, it's a strength. And that they are all going to struggle as they transition from elementary to high school, from high school to gap year, from gap year to college, from college to young professionals, however it may be. And the most important thing they can take with them is the idea that they're not alone. And that if the struggle becomes too big for them, they have so many individuals in their lives who are willing to help. And it took me so long to learn that lesson. And I don't want anyone to have to go through what I did to learn that lesson in the ways that I needed to. So I really implore all of them to think about like what it means for them to ask for help. And it can really just be as simply as saying, I need help, and allowing people to surround them with love and support until they figure out, what it is they need and the type of support that can help them kind of flourish in the way they need to. When I'm talking to you as parents, I really want to stress the idea that there is no perfect way to parent. There is no foolproof way to avoid addiction or mental health issues or those type of things. The best we can do is accentuating the protective factors and mitigating the risk factors, and then having the faith that the seeds you plant in your children are going to grow in a healthy way and they will be able to make healthy decisions because of that. But at the end of the day, it is still on them. It's on them, and there really is no way to change that reality. And so as I go through the slideshow today, we're going to get to a point in slides where I'm going to talk about like what those protective factors are, what those risk factors are, how to accentuate and mitigate those. And at the end, obviously, I'm around for question and answer, so anything that you guys have, I'm an open book. There's no, it always happens where somebody says, like, I don't know if you feel comfortable talking about this. The answer is yes. Like, I feel comfortable talking about it. Again, this is the most important thing I'm going to do today. Tomorrow, talking to the kids is going to be the most important thing I do then. Thursday, Friday, so on. So any question, you guys feel free, please. I want to make sure you know that I'm an open book. So I want to start off with a few slides that kind of mimic the stuff we talked to the kids about, just so you guys have an idea of what these presentations look like. And one of the key pieces of information we give is the addiction cycle. We really, really want the kids to understand how addiction manifests, what's happening in the brain, what's happening in the body, just because having an understanding of it allows it to feel a little bit more, the risk to feel a little bit more real. It's not this now like amorphous thing like addiction. It's a word, I've heard it, I kind of know what it means. Like, we want them to really understand what's happening. So it really has to do with the dopamine response system. Right? Dopamine is a pleasure chemical in our brain. Whether you guys realize it or not, dopamine is pretty much responsible for the formation of almost all the decisions we as human beings make. From the time where, like toddlers and babies, we understand that satiating our thirst and our hunger releases dopamine. It feels good. We understand that we should socialize because dopamine is released when we socialize. It feels good. Hard work, the idea that we study, we make a plan, we set goals, we achieve those goals, feels good. That's all that it comes from dopamine. Nothing releases more dopamine than mood-altering substances. So what it does is it immediately hijacks that reward system. And like I said in my story, the first time I got drunk, it wasn't enough anymore just to hang out with my friends. That pleasure, that enjoyment was not satisfactory anymore. And I wanted that to be enhanced by alcohol. I want that to be enhanced by marijuana. And eventually when I got, tried harder, more powerful narcotics, it really, really completely blew out the dopamine rush, and this had to be a 24/7 thing. And with any of these substances, whether it's alcohol or marijuana or any of the more legal street drugs or nicotine, like the tolerance is going to build. You're going to need more and more of that substance to achieve the same feeling. And the more you ingest into your body, the more your brain chemistry is going to change. The more your brain chemistry is going to change, the more beholden to that substance you're going to be, until you eventually develop mental and physical withdrawal symptoms in the absence of that substance. And at that point, you're at the end stage of addiction. You can be like clinically diagnosed what is known as a severe substance use disorder. It's not minor, it's not mild, it's severe. You're experiencing the highest level of consequences from it. And at this point, it's also really, really difficult to stop because of those mental and emotional and physical withdrawal symptoms. And use at this point is driven by survival, and it's totally reflexive. It's not a choice. So for me at this point in my addiction, again, I mentioned I associated heroin with safety and survival. Because my brain was not functioning properly, and because my brain associated my drug of choice with safety and survival, I did horrible, horrible, horrible things to get the drug, because I literally could not distinguish between what was reality, if I was really in danger, versus the fact that my brain was saying, you need this right now or else something catastrophic is going to happen. And again, at that point in addiction, no logical reasoning is going to allow somebody who's in that state to self-regulate in a way where they're not going to do things to get the drug of choice. So we're actually seeing something, I guess interesting is too tame a word. I would say for maybe even troubling amongst, I guess, what is it, Gen Alpha now, and even some of Gen Z, which is substance use has kind of flattened, and in some cases it's actually decreasing, but we are seeing an explosion in these process and behavioral addictions. Specifically, the thing that's most troubling for me is gambling. The amount of young men I speak to, starting in 6th grade, who are casually gambling, I really truly believe in 5 to 10 years, the next great public health crisis we're going to have in this country is a generation of young men who we are going to lose to gambling addiction. The amount of elementary school, junior high, high schoolers I talk to who are gambling regularly, it is staggering. The amount of parents I speak to who don't fully grasp the severity of that is also staggering. So I really want to make very plain right now. I don't think any of you would ever take your child to a liquor store, buy them some liquor and say, let's go have a good time. Any parent who is gambling with their child, who says, it's football Sunday, let's place a couple bets together, it is akin to you taking your child to the liquor store and buying them booze, right? And we are seeing now gambling is increasing in rates across mostly the male population, but starting very, very young, all the way to young professionals, that the rates of people who are seeking treatment for gambling addiction are rising, the amount of calls to gambling prevention hotlines are rising, the amount of people who are losing and taking their life because of gambling addiction are rising, and we're really not close to the crest of this yet. Like, we're really, really not close to the crest, and it's, again, as someone who's in this field and professional, I look at this and I think this is going to make the opioid epidemic look like a walk in the park. So I really, really want all parents to be aware that gambling, this is something that is dangerous, that the developing brain cannot process or handle in an effective way, and only the act of placing the bet, it's not winning or losing, the act of placing the bet is already planting the seeds for the addiction. This is some interesting data we have on, we're going to tie it into alcohol use, but Monitoring the Future is a survey that's done by the University of Michigan, and as you can see with these substances, it's pretty clear, like as an individual gets older, their exposure to these substances grows. It's very obvious. You would expect seniors in high school to use alcohol, cannabis, and nicotine products at higher rates than 10th and 8th graders. What we wanted to do is the high school and Machon Siach, they produced a similar survey for yeshiva leagues, and what we found through this was that our 10th and 12th graders are not only experiencing higher rates of 30-day and lifetime use of alcohol, but also higher rates of binge drinking. Now, if we only saw the trends of 30-day and lifetime use, we could say, okay, that makes sense. Alcohol is a big part of our rituals, especially with 10th and 12th graders. Maybe they're making kiddush. Maybe their parents allow them to drink a little bit on Shabbat. The red flag comes when we see that the binge drinking rates in our community are almost double the secular community. Right? We have a messaging problem. We have an exposure problem. Alcohol is a big part of our rituals. There is no escaping that. So what do we need to do, right? It starts with accessibility and messaging. And I said in my story, again, it was like very routine. And, I growing up in New Rochelle, it was a beautiful, amazing upbringing. I really, happens in every community. So don't think I'm singling out New Rochelle here. But I just remember when I was growing up, when we would go to someone's house Friday night or for the Chagim or for Shabbat lunch, it really was showing off, this bottle of wine, this type of liquor, you have to try this, you have to try that. And the imprint it left on me was one of, alcohol is not something that we should reserve for these very, very, very special, sacred, and holy rituals, but alcohol was a deep and ingrained part of what it means to be Jewish, and that it was something that was almost like a competition, and it was really like, this is how you prove your status and worth in the community. There were tables and tables and tables of liquor. I remember, I went to the New Rochelle, and my friends and I, we used to take 1 or 2 bottles. If we knew we were having a party that Saturday night, we used to take 1 or 2 bottles off the table, hide it, come pick it up on a Saturday night. And nobody was any the wiser. Nobody was checking up on the alcohol. Nobody was making sure that what was laid out at the start of Kiddush was what got put back at the end of Kiddush, and all these type of things. So when we speak in communities today, we really want you guys to think and understand is, what is your messaging in your home around alcohol? How is it presented in front of your kids? What do you think they're seeing, and how do you think they're interpreting that? There is no real bad way to over-communicate around this, and again, I'm going to get to that later in the slide, but it's something that we really want every parent, every community, every school to begin to think about is, what are the model behaviors and what is the messaging specifically around alcohol, our observance, and our rituals? So this is just an example of a type of slide we use to kind of educate the kids on alcohol. We don't want them to think that 5% beer is somehow healthier than gin or rum or vodka because there's more alcohol content. We really want them to understand all alcohol is dangerous. Some beverages have lower alcohol content than others, but at the end of the day, once you drink it, it's all the same, right? Alcohol is damaging whether it comes from beer, whether it comes from wine, whether it comes from hard liquor. And that at the end of the day, the adolescent developing brain really isn't equipped to process the sensation of being drunk, regardless of where the alcohol is coming from. This slide has changed a little bit this year because we actually have done a really good job messaging around e-cigarettes and vapes. And we see a pretty sharp decrease year over year among adolescents and teens who are using e-cigarettes and vapes. The issue is we are seeing a corresponding increase in the amount of adolescents and teens who are using nicotine pouches. So you can see here some examples, Zyn and Velo and On. These things are really discreet. They are really difficult to police if your child gets a hold of them. It used to be kids would vape in class and there would still be maybe a plume of smoke or the smell, but nowadays a teacher can turn their back, the kid can take it out of their pouch, it's a little nicotine dissolvable, goes right under the lip, and that's it, it's gone. You're not chewing anything, it's not obvious that it's in there, and the whole time they are getting a nicotine rush, and it's flavored. All the ridiculously fun flavors that now vapes are not allowed to have, like espresso and pink lemonade and berry blast, whatever they might be, the nicotine pouches, they can do all those things. So it's not yet as widespread as vaping and other nicotine products are, but it is trending up and up and up in a way that is very concerning. So we just want parents to be aware, if you see any of these Zyn or Velo containers around the house, or if you spot a little, it looks almost like a very small miniature pillow, this little white pouch, is a very good chance that it might be a nicotine product. And we want the kids to understand specifically that there's no safe way to consume nicotine, that these products, they look fun, they look flashy, they have fun flavors, and all those things might be tempting. And yeah, it doesn't interact with your lungs, and there's no carcinogens in it, but nicotine in and of itself causes high blood pressure, increases your risk for heart attack, for strokes. Heavy nicotine users are often malnourished, and that can cause other issues with your hair, your skin, your teeth. Not to mention the fact that you are repeatedly putting something in your lip and your gums. It can rot your gums, it can rot your cheek. So we really go out of our way to explain to kids that these nicotine pouches, they are just as harmful, they are just as addictive, and they are potentially just as deadly, even if they aren't interacting with the lungs and even if they aren't putting at the same risk for cancer or infections. THC is also something that has evolved and changed a lot over the years. So, when I was in high school, I graduated high school in 2008, the average marijuana plant had about maybe 10 to 15% THC in it. Over the last, 2 decades, they have really developed through strain cultivation, fertilization techniques. It's very, very much enhanced. So you can get plants that are 30 to 40% THC, and that's even before we talk about just the fact that there are 80 to 90% THC waxes and oils and that kind of stuff out there. And we've seen, as the legalization of marijuana has kind of proliferated through the country, a corresponding rise in THC-induced psychosis, cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome, all these other negative effects that come with this new highly potent THC. And the generation that's kind of, I would say, maybe the older Gen Zs, the very, very young millennials, who are really at the forefront of the legalization of marijuana. Individuals who have consistently smoked throughout their developmental years now, they have much higher rates of anxiety disorders, of depressive disorders, and in many cases where there's a family history of mental health issues, like increased rates of schizophrenia and schizoaffective disorders. So THC is it's a hallucinogen, and because it was not so potent in the past, those properties really weren't evident. But now that it is more potent and there is more of it per plant, we are seeing these hallucinogenic properties more frequently in THC users. And that's why we are seeing so many teens who get admitted to hospitals with THC-induced psychosis. They don't know where they are. They don't know who they are. They're not oriented properly. And even one instance of that can cause profound hurdles in brain development. And so the kids oftentimes, they'll think like, it's a fun plant, it's all natural, it's not that bad. We really want to get them away from that. What existed in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, like that's not the marijuana that you're going to encounter today. This is much more potent, it's much more dangerous, and it causes severe developmental disabilities if it's used even semi-regularly as the 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18-year-olds. Normally I have this really fun table with all these little actual live examples of these edibles. I wasn't able to bring it tonight. We split up, but this is what your kids are seeing and facing and dealing with. The reality is that the edibles that they are faced with, they're designed to look extremely enticing. They're designed to mimic brands they trust, they know. And there are so many stories we hear at CCSA of kids who they eat an edible by accident because they think it's a candy, they think it's a cookie, they think it's a chip, they find it in their home, it comes from their brother, or they're at a cousin's house, or whatever it might be. And so we have a slide, pretty much every slideshow, I want to say starting in 8th grade, where we talk about like, how do you spot the differences? What are some things that look different from a regular Gushers packet? What are some of the differences from a regular Chips Ahoy packet? And we want the kids to understand that if you come across this, even accidentally, these are legal products. If you're over 21, put it down, put it away, the same way you wouldn't just go ahead and drink your parents' alcohol, the same way you wouldn't just go ahead and smoke a cigarette you find on the floor. Like, these are not things that you're meant to deal with right now. Go ahead and put it back where you found it. And we encourage them. If you found it in your own home, if you found it with your siblings or whoever, talk to your sibling, talk to your parents, have a conversation about it, because we want them to feel comfortable communicating about these things. Off the bat, I want to really preface this by saying there is nothing wrong with someone being prescribed medication. Right? Medication is a tool. Right? Tools are used to create beautiful, beautiful, beautiful things. I don't want any child to feel ashamed if they are prescribed medication. I don't want any parent to feel ashamed that their kids are on medication. There is no correlation between the proper use of ADHD or ADD medication and risk for addiction. None, right? There's zero correlation between it. What we do see is untreated ADD and ADHD actually does lead to higher rates of addiction, and the misuse of ADD or ADHD medication does lead to higher rates of addiction. So if you have a child and they're on medication and the medication is being dispensed and used properly, I don't want any of you to feel anxious about what you are doing in terms of setting that child up for addiction in the future. We just want to make sure that you are paying attention to how much medication the child has, and maybe as they get older they can earn the trust to dispense it themselves and things like that. But there is risk for misuse with these substances. There are other kids who are going to maybe want to trade for these substances, who are going to want to use them that aren't prescribed for them. And so we really want the kids to understand the 2 rules around prescription medication: never share and always follow the instructions. And if you do those 2 things, you're golden, right? It's when you start to share your medication with people you're not supposed to, and when you take more and or less, that you begin to enter into a realm where there could be consequences. And so we really, really reinforce those 2 rules. Be selfish, follow instructions, and that's perfect. Otherwise, you're doing those 2 things, there's nothing to worry about. This is something we talk to with the juniors and seniors. We don't really address it prior to that because thankfully, like it's just not a pressing issue. It's something that, 10th grade and under, they're really not likely to be exposed to this. But for the older upperclassmen who are on the verge of leaving and experiencing the world at large, you want them to understand what fentanyl is and how lethal it is, and the fact that any college campus that you are going to in this country, they're going to have counterfeit pills. And every year, without fail, there are heartbreaking stories of kids who feel like they get into college, they get into a more competitive academic environment, they're maybe not able to keep up, and they go to, sorority row or fraternity row, they go to the pharmacist over there, and they pick something up, and it's not what they think it is. And like really bright, good kids who don't have an issue with substances, they overdose because they think they're taking an Adderall, and it's a fentanyl. They're fentanyl-laced pill. They think they're taking a Xanax to help them relax, and it's a fentanyl-laced pill. And we just want every kid who is on the verge of leaving a yeshiva high school to understand that if you are feeling overwhelmed when you leave here, there are student support services, you have your parents, you have other therapists and psychiatrists around. Never, 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 never buy a pill from someone who is just on your college campus. You have no idea how far up the chain are you willing to trust that you know where this is coming from, right? And any mistake could be your last. I do a thing all the time where we have a slide where the real and the fake is covered up. And I'll ask a student, like, your life depends on it. Which is the real pill, which is the fake pill, right? And all of a sudden, without fail, every presentation I have a kid who feels very, very confident. I know exactly what's real. I know exactly what's not. And without fail, every time I do a presentation, that confident kid will always pick, there's always three choices. They will always pick 1 out of 3, that is the fake pill. And all it takes is one. All it takes is one to make a life-altering fatal mistake. Okay, so these I think are the most important slides, so I'm going to spend a little more time on them. When we talk about risk factors and protective factors, again, it's not about being perfect. We want to mitigate the risk factors as much as possible and accentuate the protective factors as much as possible. And if those two things are happening, you have a great chance of avoiding some of the pitfalls that I had. And I'm going to use my own experience in the context here because there were a litany of risk factors present in my upbringing, starting with the family history. The alcoholism that was in my family was not something that was talked about when I was growing up in a real way because my father couldn't acknowledge his drinking while I was a teenager, and because he couldn't acknowledge his drinking, it was impossible for anyone in my family to have an honest conversation around it. So right off the bat, I was at a disadvantage without really understanding what was in my genetic code and how I am a clone of my father in 100 different ways, including the addiction. Thankfully, my father now has been sober actually over 12 years. But there was very cursory comments about, this is something you might want to watch out for. Your people, your grandfather, your great-grandfather, they've had issues with this, but nothing so explicit as saying, like, you have addiction in your family. This is in your genetic code. You have lost relatives because of this disease. You need to be very, very careful. There was nothing ever explicit as that. It was always kind of beating around the bush. Parental involvements and attitudes. My house was the fun house. My parents wanted to be the cool parents. And I understand the logic in thinking like they're going to do it anyways. Let them do it under my roof. It's a horrible idea for a couple reasons. The first one is, God forbid you have underage kids drinking in your home or using other substances in your home and there is a medical emergency. The amount of trouble you can be in is huge to the point where you could have your children taken away. If you are an adult, you have kids in your home, they're drinking and using, and there's something occurs. You can be the greatest parents in the world, a spotless record. If you have a kid who suffers from alcohol poisoning, someone has to call 911, you are in a world of trouble. A world of trouble. Right off the bat, I tell parents, is that a risk you want to take? Is that a risk that you think it's worth rolling the dice for? Because I can promise you, when I was growing up, my parents thought we were doing X in the basement, and we were doing X times 400 in the basement. And thank God nothing ever happened. Setting healthy boundaries and expectations with your kids is the best possible thing you can do. I love you. I want you to have a good time tonight. Understand, I do not condone drinking. I do not condone nicotine use. I do not condone drug use. I expect you to remain sober tonight. I expect you to have a good time tonight. But I also want you to know I know people make mistakes. If you violate those boundaries, I want you to feel that you can come to me. We can have a discussion about it and talk about why you felt the need to do that. I'm not saying you're going to get in trouble. Maybe yes, maybe no, but we will have to have a conversation about it. I can talk to the kids till I'm blue in the face. Teachers can talk to the kids till they're blue in the face about their expectations, about boundaries, about behaviors. It does not mean nearly as much as when parents do it. My parents never had those conversations with me. They never really said, these are the boundaries, these are expectations, we think you can rise to the occasion. Like, again, great loving parents. I don't mean to sound like I'm kind of ragging on them here. They didn't know any better. So the best thing you as parents can do is set those boundaries and expectations rigidly, with the understanding that if they're not met, it's not the end of the world. It just means we're going to have a discussion on why they weren't met. And sure, possibility, maybe there are consequences, but it's not a guarantee. Mental health issues, right? If you have a child you know is already suffering from some mental health issues, it really requires a little bit of extra care and communication around that, especially if there's a family history around it. Trauma, right? If you have a child and maybe there's a divorce, there is a death in the family, there's something else that has occurred that can create a level or sense of trauma for a period of time, right? There needs to be some extra attention being paid, right? Make sure that child is supported, that child has the opportunity to talk about what's going on, that it is not ignored, right? Because in these situations, a lot of times, trauma kind of gets swept under the rug, everybody thinks everything's fine, and really there is a lot of stuff bubbling up underneath the surface. And then peer pressure, everyone's going to experience it. Really what we want parents to understand is, like, if they see their child hang out with a new group of kids, if they see old friends kind of disappear, if they see isolation, right, check in. I've noticed that you're not really hanging out with so-and-so so much anymore, and you've kind of been with this group, like, how come? What's going on with that? Protective factors. Talking to your children is the first and foremost, and a lot of things kind of offshoot on that. Again, there's no possible way to over-communicate on these topics a lot of times, right? And in a minute, we're going to talk about what that means and how to communicate, but there really isn't any way to over-communicate a lot on these conversations if you're having honest, open dialogue. Family community engagement is exactly what SAR you guys are doing now, and exactly what's going to happen over the course of the rest of the week with prevention education, right? The combination of having a parent program, having an organization like CCSA come to the school and engage with the kids, and then having you, the parents, and your kids dialogue about it after. What was your experience with the program? What was the thing that you found most interesting? What was the thing? Give me one thing that you disagreed with, right? Having these open-ended dialogue with your kids about the program and giving them the opportunity. What did you guys think of the program? What was in the parent program that you guys felt interesting? It's going to reinforce what they learned and help them carry that into the future. Delay the age of first use. This is the ultimate thing at the end of the day that we at CCSA want to accomplish. We know that 90% of individuals who are diagnosed with a substance use disorder started using before the age of 18. And when I mean started using, it means they started to feel the effects of the substance. It's not had a sip of wine or had a little bit of wine once a week on Shabbat, but it means like getting drunk, feeling the effects. If we can delay that age of first use to 18, we see addiction rates drop. They drop again if we can delay it to 21, but that's a little bit more challenging. 18 we're going to settle for because we really see a precipitous drop at 18. So if we can get the kids to 18 without getting drunk, getting high, or trying nicotine, that is a massive, massive, massive win. And we really want to make sure that they understand that they have a whole lifetime to make the choice on if they want to get drunk or high or whatever. There's no reason to make that choice now. Let your brains develop so you can adequately judge the risk and the reward. When you get to a point where you're old enough, if the choice you want is to engage with substances, go right ahead. But for the time being, understand your brain's not really equipped to handle that. And ultimately, at the end of the day, we really just want the kids to delay that age of first use, get them to 18, and if they choose then to wait till 21, great, but really want to make sure that they understand right now is not the right time. So anybody who has a teenage child, these are just, it might honestly a lot of times be the default state. So red flags doesn't mean something is necessarily wrong. This is the point of the presentation where I talk about mother's intuition. So there have been so many times where I've been working with a client everything seems right, everything seems fine, everything's okay. They're showing up for appointments. Their tox screens are coming up as negative. They're participating in group, and I get a call from a mom, and it's, I'm concerned. I'm seeing XYZ, and my response is, I haven't seen anything, but I will let you know. Without fail, anytime I got a call from a mother like that, within a week, tox screen is positive for something. They missed an appointment, didn't show up for group. There's no way, I don't know to quantify it, but I firmly believe mother's intuition is a real thing. Father's intuition, sorry dads, I haven't come across it yet, but when you see a child with the red flags, if you're a mother and you have a feeling in your stomach, trust it. The number one thing I want to take away if you're a mother in this is always, always, always trust your gut. I cannot really explain it or quantify it, but mother's intuition, it is one of the most powerful things. I truly believe it on this planet. And if you think if something is wrong with your child, follow your gut. Don't let anybody doubt you. Don't let anybody gaslight you. Trust that feeling. If you see these red flags and you don't think anything's wrong and you're under the assumption like, hey, he's a teen, she's a teen, this is kind of the part and parcel, by all means, if you want to communicate around it, great. But I really just want you guys to feel confident into kind of distinguishing when you think something is wrong and when you think it's nothing, and just feeling the confidence to have a conversation around it. The best way to have these types of conversations is open-ended questions, right? Not, did you have a good day at school today? Yes. Okay, great. Where's the follow-up? It's, what was the most challenging part of school today? What was the most exciting part of school today? What was the best thing you learned today and why, right? Really force these kids to think about these answers, right? These open-ended questions. And you can do the same thing around the program. What was the most important thing you think you learned today from CCSA? What was the most interesting thing you heard from the presenter's story? What was something you think you disagree with? Maybe you think it's not that big of a deal. Right? Really have this open-ended dialogue with them after these programs. It's going to reinforce what we talked about with them. It's going to allow them to also understand, most importantly, hey, I can actually talk to my parents about this. This conversation wasn't as mortifyingly embarrassing as I anticipated. This was actually a worthwhile endeavor, right? If it becomes a conversation around broken boundaries later in life, I think the important thing is to always remember, offer empathy and support, stay calm, but that doesn't mean absolution or lack of punishment. Sometimes consequences are necessary, and at the end of the day, always pick the right time to talk, right? You, I think, as parents, know your kids the best, so I'm not going to necessarily offer guidance around that, but it can be walking the dog, maybe a little bit before bed, maybe in a car ride together, whatever it might be, but always picking the right time to talk. And as long as you kind of focus on picking the right time and those open-ended questions, you really can't go wrong with the conversation. Really briefly, this is just signs of an overdose. I recommend everybody has Narcan in their home just in case. If someone is having an overdose from another substance, Narcan is not going to cause any harm, but really you just want to make sure that someone's put in that recovery position immediately and that you call 911. We talk to the kids about this too, just in case, especially the high school kids, if they're at a party, God forbid something like this happens. We want to make sure they know how to respond in a way that is going to hopefully save, maybe not necessarily in the situation of save a life, but just mitigate potential negative outcomes. These are just some examples of questions, very basic questions that kids ask us all the time. Like, the one we get all the time is, how bad is it if we really just tried once? And we at CCSA really follow that question up with, if you try it once, yeah, you probably won't get addicted. But how do you know you'll be able to try it just once? I tried Percocet just once, and it set me off on, a really, really difficult decade. I tried alcohol just once, and nothing was as fun afterwards. So we really want the kids to understand, we want to be honest with them. Yeah, if you are able to use it just once, probably nothing's going to happen. But how do you know that will be you? Because every alcoholic and addict in the history of the world tried it for the first time. And every single one of them thought they were not going to get addicted, myself included. Right? So that's the most common question. Is it really that bad if I try it just once? It's not really that bad if you try it just once, but how do you know that's where it's going to end? I want to thank everyone for coming out tonight. Like, I really understand how busy all of you are, and that this is probably not the first place you want to be on a Tuesday evening. So just as someone whose family would have benefited greatly from this program, whose parents would have benefited greatly from the program, I really want to just really extend a heartfelt thank you to all of you. Obviously, SAR, this place is very, very special to me, as I just, graduated from here in 04, the high school in 08, so every time I come back here, it just brings back so many memories, and extremely, extremely, extremely humbled and privileged that I get the opportunity to speak to the kids here every year. It's the highlight of my time at CCSA every year coming back here. And if there are any questions that you guys might have right now, again, now is the time to ask. If you don't want to ask it up front, I'm not running out. You can come up and talk to me afterwards. But just really, really, again, thank you guys so much for coming out tonight. It means a lot to me, and I hope you found it worthwhile.
Okay, I want to open up to questions. We did not put this at the beginning, which I could pretend was strategic. Actually, it's oversight. So we're going to put up some refreshments also. So, if you need a little boost, feel free. We also said the presentation was 6 until 7. I'm not saying 6, 7 consecutively. But so I know that some people need to go, and that's no disrespect to any of us, but also we'd love to encourage questions. And of course, if there's questions you'd rather just approach them afterwards, or approach me or Dr. Sarna, we could do that as well.
Yeah.
My first question is this video available to be sent? Is that?
Yeah, well,
I'm not sure what the.
Right? I think we said that if people ask for it, we would send it to them. Right, Michelle? The video of tonight?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's about like 1 or 2 people emailed us in advance that they weren't able to make it, so.
But if you're interested in having it, then we'll send it to you.
Yeah.
Really, probably the most softball question you're going to get. Well, how is exercise an addictive behavior?
So I'm going to start off by, clinically approaching addiction from the diagnostic manual, which the first thing I look at when I'm looking at someone who thinks they have an addictive behavior, the baseline is 3 things, right? Have you tried to stop but cannot? Are you engaging in the behavior in a substance in increasing amounts? And have you experiencing negative consequences through that? So exercise can become addictive behavior if you meet those 3 criteria, right? Are you exercising in increasing amounts? Does it go from 1 to 2 hours? 2 hours a day once to 2 hours a day twice a day? Have you tried to cut back on exercise? Have you tried to say, okay, I'm going to take a day off on Sunday, but still found yourself in the gym? And are you experiencing negative consequences from it? So are your relationships suffering? Are you not giving your body enough time to heal and to recover? Are you starting to shirk responsibilities because you'd rather be in the gym? So if you are starting to meet those 3 criteria, and it can be with anything, it might be time to talk to help or to talk to somebody about whether this is an addiction or a compulsion, where it falls on the behavioral spectrum, and how to seek support for that. Did you have a question, sir?
I was just trying to figure out logistically when the different classes are being spoken to.
Yeah, for sure. So,
I have the schedule too. If you
yeah,
guys.
so 8th grade has longer sessions. They have 2 sessions actually, and it's like just a little bit more extensive. And then 6th and 7th graders they're just 1 session each. They're slightly shorter.
So
it's over the
yeah,
next couple of days.
tomorrow we start the 8th grade program. So we do a lot with the 8th graders. So tomorrow they'll get part 1. I think it's split into 3 groups. So I'm going to be here with 2 other presenters. All of them are really, really good. And they'll get the introductory personal narrative, and they'll get the start of the slideshow. They'll get a chance to write down questions, which we will then answer in part 2. Thursday is going to be 6th grade, and then the second half of the 8th grade program, and then Friday is going to be 7th grade. All right, thank you guys so much. If anyone has any questions, I'm staying up here. Really, really
Thank you guys
appreciate
so
it.
much.
Have a
As I
great
said,
evening.
You guys taking the time out tonight is a huge, dedication to this effort, and we're around for any questions. If you have any questions afterwards, we can put you in touch, or you can direct them towards us. And have a wonderful evening. Please take some refreshments. Thank you.